This talk wanted to give on selected problematic areas in diagnostic breast pathology, which is mainly going to deal with intraductal lesions of the breast. Still have nothing to disclose. So the learning objectives for us are going to be to recognize atypical intraductal proliferations in core biopsy specimens primarily. We'll look at things to distinguish benign from atypical hyperplasia, including ductal and lobular lesions. And we'll understand the significance of atypia when it's found at the time of core needle biopsy. This actually is a lot simpler than it's made out to sound. In a lot of cases, as we know, when atypia is found on a core biopsy, usually at least a conservative re-excision is made. The format of the presentation is we're going to introduce a benign intraductal breast lesion as sort of the paradigm lesion, and then use that to kind of compare the atypical lesions and bounce off different morphologic cues just to serve as a compare and contrast. We'll look at some diagnostic pearls and pitfalls, and then when to use ancillary studies. Most of this is going to be morphology-based with a couple of slides looking at ways to distinguish between lobular and ductal lesions and sometimes UDH as well as atypical lesions as well. I'm not going to be covering everything that's on all the slides that you have on your syllabus, but I did want to include them in there in case you wanted to peruse them a little bit later, but just in the interest of kind of keeping within time. So let's take a look at columnar cell lesions and the columnar cell differential. The benign paradigmatic lesion is columnar cell change. The big differential diagnosis we end up having to struggle through is flat epithelial atypia, atypical ductal hyperplasia ADH, or in some cases, DCIS that happens to have a very clinging architecture. We all know why it's challenging. And these lesions, a lot of times, the only thing that makes us feel more comfortable with them is just more and more experience, having colleagues to bounce off difficult cases off of. The lack of significant intraductal hyperplasia makes assessment of cells tricky. As a surgical pathologist, I rely a lot on architecture to help me get through some things in which the cytology is a little ambiguous. But in these cases, we don't have a lot of intraductal hyperplasia, so we do have to use a lot more nuclear morphology just to sort of help us get through benign versus something a little bit more atypical versus something that might be outright malignant. The clinical and radiographic features of these lesions often overlap, and they're not very helpful diagnostically. Most of the time, these things either present, well, actually they usually present as microcalcifications, and we receive a stereotactic biopsy. We all know that this is an area with inter-observer variability. Depending upon how much caffeine I usually have, which tends to be quite a bit, nectar of the gods, I can go from columnar cell lesions to start thinking about flat epithelial atypia before I've really had a chance to sink my teeth into the lesion.
So today I'm talking about pathology of breast cancer recurrence and metastasis. The Cleveland Clinic has a breast program leadership committee. They try to do a number of things, but some of the things they look for are niche markets or niche subspecialties. And so right now they have a niche in invasive lobular carcinoma and recurrence, and I believe they're looking for young breast cancer and pregnancy-associated breast cancer. So here's me, here's the Cleveland Clinic. I have no disclosures. So for today, it's a little long, but I'll make it sure we don't go over. It's a case presentation. Then we're going to talk about the historic pathology of recurrent disease, biomarker testing, recurrence versus new primary, and then the pathology of metastasis. So here's our case. It's a 45-year-old woman. She's it's October of 2020, has an abnormal mass, 1.5 centimeters. In November of 2020, it's biopsied. It's an invasive ductal carcinoma grade 3, ERPR positive, HER2 negative by IHC. And then in December of 2020, she has her lumpectomy and sentinel lymph node biopsy surgery that yielded a invasive ductal carcinoma grade 3. It was 1.5 centimeters, DCIS grade 3, sentinel lymph nodes were all negative, margins were greater than 2 millimeters, so it's staged out as a PT1C, PN0. She received radiation therapy and chemotherapy with AI. So here you have an ultrasound. You can see the hypoechoic irregular mass in the center. And then on the right is the mammogram, which corresponds nicely to the ultrasound. And then in the center is the gross picture. which shows that irregular mass. It is white, tan, irregular. Looks like there may be some central necrosis that may be due to the biopsy site. So at low power, you see these basaloid nests of infiltrating cells. It looks like there are maybe some areas at the upper left here that could be in situ carcinoma, but the majority of this tumor appears to be invasive with a desmoplastic stroma. On high power, there's quite a bit of nuclear polymorphism. You can see why this was called Nottingham grade 3 on both needle core and on excision. The nuclei are round, have a bit of irregularity to them, kind of these macronucleoli, and some hyperchromasia. Amphiphilic cytoplasm. So here is some DCIS. It's kind of falling apart.
Okay, so what we're going to do this morning is to talk about the challenge of evaluating post-neoadjuvant systemic therapy breast specimens. Now, how many of you see these specimens? So you know how easy they are to evaluate, right? So what I'm going to try to do this morning is to give you some tips as to how best to do this. And I have no relevant disclosures. So, as I'm sure you know, in current clinical practice, most patients with invasive breast cancer receive some type of systemic therapy, either endocrine therapy, chemotherapy, HER2-targeted therapy, or some combination of these, the details of which depend on the tumor characteristics. And systemic therapy can be either given in the adjuvant setting, meaning after definitive surgical treatment, or in the neoadjuvant setting, that is after a core needle biopsy showing a diagnosis of cancer, but prior to definitive surgical treatment. So just from a historical perspective, neoadjuvant systemic therapy was initially used to treat patients with locally advanced breast cancer, that is those with T4 disease. But the efficacy in that setting provided the rationale for clinical trials in earlier stage disease. And a meta-analysis of 10 randomized trials with over 4,700 patients showed no significant survival difference between patients treated with neoadjuvant systemic therapy and those treated with adjuvant systemic therapy. And these are the distant recurrence and mortality curves from the Oxford overview comparing neoadjuvant to adjuvant systemic therapy. And you can see there's absolutely no difference. So if there's no difference, then what are the benefits for neoadjuvant systemic therapy? Well, one of the major benefits is that it can reduce the local disease burden resulting in downstaging. And this can result in converting somebody who is non-operable to someone who is operable. It can change someone who requires a mastectomy to somebody who can be adequately treated with breast-conserving therapy. And it can change someone who needs an axillary dissection to one who can benefit from only a sentinel lymph node biopsy. Furthermore, this is an in vivo assessment of tumor response to treatment. It permits the tailoring of further systemic therapy based on response to the neoadjuvant therapy. And it's the extent of response is an important prognostic factor for these patients. Furthermore, the treatment response in clinical trials of neoadjuvant therapy is used by the FDA as a criterion supporting approval of new drugs, sort of speeding up that process. So as I'm sure you know, there are several possible responses of tumors to neoadjuvant systemic therapy.